One thing I have told, and I have a colleague that has told me in the last few many years, if there's one thing you can do, Scott, is like if somebody reaches out to you on Facebook or Instagram, be a mentor, right? I don't
Mm,
have all the answers. I know what I did and I know what worked and what didn't. But at the same time, I've run into photographers that are not very nice.
yeah.
And that, strangely, as strange as it sounds, it's mostly in aviation. In the music stuff, if I was standing at a show, and I have one photographer in particular that I'm thinking about, but if I was standing at a show and I hadn't shot that band and they used various kinds of lighting and special effects and pyro, explosion stuff, I could say to him like, "Hey, what settings do you use?" And he would tell me, right?
Mhm.
And it was like, with cycling with this guy that I mentioned earlier, or some of the other guys that we used to hang out at all the races. I'd say, "Hey, like, where do you stand to get the best shots on the course? Or what settings do you what you know, that turned into a couple of them saying, "Hey, we have this gig, we can't do it. Do you want to take it? Paid gig, go take it. We're busy." Those in the aviation thing, it's actually the opposite, which is a whole different conversation. But the one thing that I say is like, if somebody were to say to me, "I like the photo, how did you take it?" Here you go.
Mhm.
And I I wish I could say it was a little different in aviation, but I haven't found that. I don't know why.
Right.
I don't know what that's about. But yeah, it was kind of a mix of, I've done a couple other interviews when my book got published. I was fortunate enough to do a couple aviation related podcasts. And the big takeaway that I've said on all of these is, again, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, as much as I love aviation like the next person, and as much as I love photography and cameras, and I'm kind of a nerd. I like all the tech stuff about cameras. Um, I also understood from working with my dad and working out there, like you have to be professional and you have to treat it like a business. If you're dealing with the military and there are gatekeepers at every step of the way, they're gonna say no. That's what they do. You can't be a jerk. You can be privately annoyed, but you have to be professional. Treat it like a business first. And I feel that same way with like other photographers. Like if somebody else wants to try to publish the next book on naval aviation, I'm gonna help them. I know what I
Right.
went through to do it, and it wasn't fun. And I'm honest with them. And I'm like, if you want to go through what I went through, by all means, but here's the steps you need to do it. And I just,
Right.
not a lot of people are like that. I'm not saying it's just me, not a lot of the photographers that I know are like that. But,
Right.
it never was. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You can love airplanes as much as the next person. But if you show up and you're just oogling the airplane, oh, oh my God, or I got access, you can't, you have to think a little differently.
Mhm.
Um, and it always has been my takeaway is how, if you want to be a hobbyist photographer and go to air shows, that is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. But the questions I get asked, like, how do you get published? How did you get access here? How did you do this? Like, number one thing, you need to be a professional. You need to treat it like a business first. Forget that there's an airplane there. Doesn't matter what's in front of you, what you're trying to get to. It's business first, professionalism. And then on top of that, like, ask other photographers. If they say go to hell, then move on to the next one. They're not all
Mhm.
gonna be that way, but if they do, move on to the next one. If you get a no from this unit, they don't want you, "Hey, we don't want it, we don't want this," move on to something else, but keep asking questions. I mean, you have to. I mean, it was
Mhm.
like you said, the curiosity part, it was just like, "Hey, I have this magazine, I see these photos. How is that person getting in your airplane?" "I don't know, but I'll find out for you." Or, like I said, I stumbled into 2 people that are like, "Yeah, we know. We know how to do that." You know? And it got exponentially harder, obviously, like I said earlier. If going from a helicopter to saying, "Well, I wanna go fly in the back of an F-18" is a completely different layer
Right.
and layer and layer of approvals and the amount of no's that come before a yes. And that's the other part with, and I'm sure you've seen it with the other photographers that you've talked to, or any business you're involved with. You're going to get told no most of the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to accept no. You just do. And there may be good reasons and there may be not. I can tell you in my career in the last 15 years, the amount of Department of Defense public affairs officers that have said no to me where the reasons are ridiculous
Mm.
are more than the ones that say no for a legitimate reason, like, "Oh, we're going to be deployed when you're asking to come." That's legitimate, right? You're gonna be in Iraq? Nothing I or we're preparing to deploy, so there's reasons we can't have you out covering our unit for security reasons because the stuff we're training. But, like, I've mentioned this many times to other photographers. My biggest pet peeve of again, I'm trying to help, right? I'm trying to tell your story. I'm trying to promote the military for the next 15-year-old that I was that wants to join, that wants to see what it's like behind the wall, the fence, whatever you want to call it. You know, a day in the life of um Maverick is a great movie, but it's not accurate. So people
Right.
like me and other people, I'm not saying I'm the only one, but people like me that do this are here to tell your story. When I am told we can't fly you or we can't do it because let's say one of the excuses I hear all the time is if we do it for you, we're going to have to do it for everybody. Okay, I hear it all the time. Um, that sets me off. That is where I will get not aggressive, but I'll say, okay, let's have this conversation over the phone. Here's my conversation. I'm not special and I'm not better than anybody else. But if I send you a request with a letter from a magazine that says they're endorsing my work and they're going to publish my work, so it's an official letter of intent, which is the requirement that you have. Plus, I send you the link to my website. Again, not saying I'm special, but you can clearly see that with my background, having worked for the Air Force, after I left the Air Force and I started my own business, by the way, I also had a 3-year contract working for the Navy, so part time, but as a naval Navy photographer at Point Magoo. So, like, if you got a request from somebody who has a Facebook page where they just post a lot of airplane photos, again, nothing wrong with that, but they're said, "Can I come out for the day? Oh, can I fly in your airplane?" And then you get mine. I think with your training as a public affairs officer, you can easily delineate the two and put your eggs into this basket to put the paperwork in to start that process of getting it approved. But to just flat out say, no, we can't do it, because then every photographer under the sun that loves airplanes is going to call and say, well, you flew Scott into your airplane. Why won't you fly me? Well, that's your job that's your side of the fence, right? To be the
Right.
professional that says there are certain people we do this for because it is of a value to the military or law enforcement. I mean, LAPD, it took me years to get into flying with LAPD, but like, they're very media shy because they're
Right.
always embroiled in some kind of scandal here. But their air unit isn't necessarily, and they kind of saw the value, but it took years from the bureaucrat side of LAPD to say, no, we don't want anybody around, right? And as soon as I say, like, look, let's get past that part of the conversation. Let me explain to you what I'm going to do for you, where it's going to end up, and what value you can create from that. I don't want to hear like, well, then I'm worried that the next photographer is going to come and but for those photographers, like I said to you earlier, if somebody called me and said, "How did you get in with LAPD?" I would tell them.